The Life of Dabi, Toya Todoroki, My Hero Academia. Dabi, real name Toya Todoroki, is a major supporting antagonist in the series. He's a villain affiliated with the League of Villains and formerly a member of the organization's Vanguard Action Squad. He and the rest of his team serve as the primary antagonists of the Forest Training Camp arc. He also serves as the antagonist for the Pro Hero arc. He later becomes one of the 9 lieutenants of the Paranormal Liberation Front, an organization formed from the remnants of the League and the Meta Liberation Army. Dabi currently serves as a commander for the Vanguard Action Guerrilla Warfare Regiment Violent, along with Getten. Welcome to the Amagi. In today's video, we're going over the life of Dabi. Before we begin, we publish a new video every day, so be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. The Amagi's reach stretches beyond just this channel, so if you're a fan of us, please consider subscribing to our other channels and following us on all of our social media. Help us reach our goal of passing 100,000 followers on all of our accounts by the end of the year. And with that out of the way, let's get into the video. Background. Seeking to have a child capable of surpassing All Might, Enji Todoroki agreed to a quirk marriage with Rei Himura. When he was 22 years old, his first child, Toya Todoroki, was born prematurely. Although he didn't inherit the quirks from both of his parents, Toya was born with a fire quirk more powerful than Enji's own Hell Flame, so when the time came, his father would train him. Later that year, his sister Fuyumi Todoroki was born. From presumably quite a young age, Toya was constantly trained by his father, and the young boy was actually quite eager to learn all of his father's moves so that he could one day become a great hero. Although none of his children bore the ideal quirk he was hoping for, Enji was satisfied with Toya and saw him capable of surpassing All Might with his powerful fire quirk alone, so he placed his ambitions on his shoulders. The situation changed drastically as Toya's red hair began to turn white and his body suffered burns every time he used his quirk. Enji and Rei went to see a quirk doctor to find out what was wrong with him. The doctor explains that while Toya has inherited a powerful fire-based quirk from his father, he also inherited his mother's resistance to freezing cold, rather than his father's resistance to scorching heat, meaning that he would burn himself whenever he used his flames. Because of this, Toya was limited in how far he could safely push himself with his quirk. Enji deemed him a failure and suddenly stopped training him. Toya, despite the dangerous flaw in his quirk, still longed to be a pro hero when he grew up. He began to beg his father to continue training him, but Enji refused, saying that it was for the sake of his well-being, but Toya wasn't pleased. Later, he talked with his sister Fuyumi and told her that he can tolerate the pain and burns, but little Fuyumi told Toya that she was also worried about him getting hurt. Her words offended Toya, who yelled that she doesn't understand him because she's a girl and walked off, saying that his father was the only one who lit the fire under him to surpass All Might. Toya began training on his own despite his father and sister trying to convince him to stop. Enji lamented that his son also inherited his stubbornness and decided to have more children until conceiving a suitable successor to his ambitions. Rei said that his idea was too cruel, especially considering Toya has finally realized what he wants to achieve through their children. But Enji considered that this plan would finally make Toya give up on his obsession. The years passed and Enji and Rei had more children. This would ultimately lead to Natsuo's conception, which made Toya start falling into despair, while Endeavor's desire to surpass All Might continued to grow. Eventually, Shoto Todoroki was born, having inherited a perfect combination of both his parents' quirks. Enji had finally conceived the much-desired heir he was seeking, but Toya despaired even more, as Shoto's birth implied that his entire purpose and his father's awareness and attention had just been taken from him. However, Toya was still determined to fulfill his father's dream and refused to abandon it. He continued training on his own. Eventually, he started going to Sekoto Peak, where his father used to train. Enji told Toya to stop training in secret because he was covered in burns, and told him to look beyond the world of being just a hero and do things like play with his siblings or make friends at school, saying he can understand that and one day it will all be a distant memory. Toya, however, with tears flowing from his eyes, told his father that everyone at school wants to be heroes themselves, and he couldn't understand what it was like to give up because he has him as a father. Enji lit the fire in him to surpass All Might, and it wasn't going out, just as he calls him by his hero name rather than father. Their argument draws Rei and the rest of his children to where they are. Broken down, Toya told his father to look at him, as he violently lashed out with his flames, activated at his mother carrying an infant Shoto, attempting to harm his youngest brother. He was stopped before he could hurt anyone, but after Toya's outburst, Enji decided to ban the other siblings from interacting with Shoto so he can focus on his training and entrusts Rei to look after Toya. When Rei said that all Toya wants is for his father to acknowledge him, Enji replied that all he can show anyone is the world of heroes, to which Rei scathingly replied that he's just running away from his problems. During the following years, Toya developed what appeared to be an excellent relationship with his siblings. They were always together and they always played together. This is especially true regarding his brother Natsuo. However, they were raised separately from their youngest brother Shoto. Likewise, his father's traumatic abuse and then abandonment had a strong emotional and mental impact on Toya, and many times he used to go to his brother Natsuo with tears in his eyes, questioning why he even existed. 5 years had passed since the incident, and Enji decided to train Shoto, preventing him from playing with his older siblings despite his begging. A 13-year-old Toya witnessed them and glared at the two of them hatefully. Later that night, he confided in Natsuo his inner doubts, acknowledging it was his fault for attacking Shoto, who did nothing wrong, but rants about his feelings towards their father and how he considers the rest of his children as failed creations, wondering whether the only thing heroes did was make children and discard them when they didn't need them. Natsuo, however, just wanted to sleep and suggested Toya talk to Fuyumi once in a while. Toya was hurt by the implication that Natsuo was brushing him off as well, explaining he was the only one who Toya could talk to. One day, when he was preparing to go train at Sekoto Peak, Rei tried to dissuade him and make him consider whether or not he really wanted to be a hero, assuring him that there are more options than the hero world. Toya was infuriated by her mother's words, yelling at her and asking if she had been reading any self-help books lately. His statements left Rei surprised as he continued his rant, saying that he already knows she only married Enji because her family was poor and that was the only reason he was born, putting responsibility for his problems on her shoulders as well. Toya continued to train at Sekoto Peak, and during the winter season, around the time he had a growth spurt, his quirk developed, and his flames' colors changed from red to blue. Toya discovered that his flames are linked to his emotional state and would get stronger if he was riled up. He started crying, saying he doesn't know why he does when he gets worked up. Shortly afterwards, excited to show his father how he had developed, Toya asked him to come to Sekoto Peak the next time he had a day off. Enji, however, lifted up his shirt and saw his burn scars, angry that Toya had been training again, but his son was adamant that he was destined for greatness and determined to make his father proud of him. Frustrated, Enji ignored his eldest son's pleas and took his anger out on Rei for not stopping Toya. Sometime later, Toya waited at Sekoto Peak for his father to meet him, but Endeavor never showed up, much to Toya's disappointment and anguish. The emotional turmoil he felt caused him to lose control of his flames, resulting in a massive wildfire. Toya tried to save himself, but he didn't know how to quell his flames, as his father only ever taught him how to increase the heat. He was scorched with flames exceeding 2,000 degrees Celsius. His body was believed to have been incinerated, and the only thing that was found was a part of his jawbone. His death affected his family, especially his mother Rei, whose mental state had already been harshly affected by her husband's past abuses, and his brother Natsuo, who still considers his father responsible for Toya's demise. Toya's family installed a Batsudan Buddhist altar in his former room after his passing and still send their prayers to him. Even Enji is seen praying at it, saying that he regrets the loss of his eldest son. However, Toya didn't die but was left with severe burns and grew up without his family knowing the truth. The traumatizing abuse Toya experienced throughout his childhood drove him to become a villain, renaming himself Dabi and dyeing his hair black to hide his true identity. As the years passed by, Dabi secretly observed his father's actions from afar. Accepting his newfound life as a villain, Dabi slowly plotted a plan to ruin Enji's life by destroying his hero career. Versus Hero Killer Arc. Dabi watches a public broadcast about the news of the hero killer's escape. Inspired by Stain's ideology, Dabi decides to move towards the organization that was widely believed to harbor Stain's cause, the League of Villains. Final Exams Arc. Giran brings Dabi and Himiko Toga to the League of Villains hideout. Dabi comments that the group's leader, Tomura Shigaraki, is gross looking, which he is, honestly. Tomura is displeased with the recruits and immediately asks Kurogiri to remove them. Kurogiri refuses, and Giran introduces Dabi as a criminal who has not done any flashy crimes but follows Stain's ideology. Dabi says he is unsure about the League's motivations and asks if they would really let a crazy girl like Himiko join. Tomura remarks that she introduced herself and asks Dabi for his name, but he says he will only reveal it at a later time. Dabi goes on to say he will make the hero killer's will a reality. Tomura becomes widely irritated by Dabi and Himiko's comments about Stain, enough so to attack them. Dabi and Himiko prepare to defend themselves, but Kurogiri steps in and uses his quirk to stop them from coming to blows. Tomura storms off as Dabi complains about his attitude. Kurogiri asks Giran and the recruits to wait for a proper answer at a later date. Forest Training Camp Arc. Dabi is eventually recruited into the League of Villains and assigned to lead a team of elite villains called the Vanguard Action Squad. Tomura acquires equipment for the team and has them pick it up at an unknown warehouse location. Himiko announces there is enough gear for everyone and they bring it along on their mission. Muscular adds that they need to hurry up, but Mustard disagrees because the team has been ordered not to rush or do anything too flashy. Dabi agrees and says that Tomura acted like a brat and attacked when they first met, but now he's suddenly taking charge. Dabi proclaims that their mission will be a warning shot that will tear down false heroes from their shining pedestals and drag them back to Earth in order to create a new future for the world. The next day, Dabi and 6 other villains secretly arrive on the Wild Pussycats Forest Reserve where UA High School students are training. The Vanguard Action Squad observes the campsite from a high vantage point. The members of the group start to argue about their next move, so Dabi tells them all to shut up. He goes on to say that Tomura was foolish for trying to attack the USJ with a band of low-level thugs, and that it's much better to use a small group of elites. Dabi announces the League of Villains' first task is to strip away the students' sense of security. The Vanguard Action Squad begins their assault the next evening. Dabi uses his quirk to set the Beast's forest ablaze in blue fire. Dabi keeps the fire going while the other villains search for Katsuki Bakugo, who's their target. Twice makes clones of Dabi so he can distract the UA teachers. Dabi waits outside of the base camp and surprise attacks Eraserhead on his way out. He blasts Eraserhead with an explosion of blue flames, but the hero evades and erases Dabi's quirk by looking at him. He overpowers the villain and pins him to the ground before interrogating him for information about his allies. Dabi refuses to comply and gets free once a few of the students arrive. Eraserhead goes to restrain Dabi again, but the clone disappears as Dabi taunts the latter, leaving Eraserhead shocked. Dabi tells Twice the clone was defeated too fast. Twice rebuffs Dabi's claim. He comically argues until Dabi orders him to make another clone to keep the pro-heroes at bay. The clone attacks the base camp again. He blasts one of the classrooms and is quickly restrained by the blood hero Vlad King. The clone goads Vlad King until Eraserhead arrives and destroys it. Mr. Compress is able to successfully capture Katsuki, compressing him into a marble along with Fumikage Tokoyami, and radios the team to rendezvous. Twice complains and Dabi argues that Mr. Compress did a fine job. Dabi seems to notice Yuga Ayama hiding behind a bush, but before he's able to act, Twice reminds him to call back Nomu. Twice had to remind Dabi to unleash Nomu on the students earlier. Dabi remembers the Nomu was designed for him and will only react to his voice. He then signals the Nomu while he and Twice walk to the meeting spot. Dabi and Twice meet Himiko first. He asks how her mission went, and Himiko replies that she was only able to collect 1 sample of blood. As Twice and Himiko begin to banter back and forth, Dabi tells them both to shut up and notices a trio of students tackling Mr. Compress out of mid-air. Dabi, unfazed by this entrance, orders Mr. Compress to move aside, and he does so by using his compressing quirk on himself. Dabi throws a fireball that burns Mezzo Shoji and Deku. The other villains attack the students, and Mr. Compress motions to give the captured students to Dabi. He meant to keep their compressed marble bodies inside his pocket, but Mezzo Shoji stole them. Kurogiri arrives to evacuate the villains as their goal is achieved. Dabi refuses to leave without Katsuki Bakugo, but Mr. Compress reassures him he was hiding the real marbles the entire time. Hiding from the shadows, Yuga Ayama shoots Mr. Compress in the face and he drops the marbles out of his mouth. Mezzo is able to retrieve Fumikage, but Dabi secures Katsuki's marble before Shoto reaches it. Dabi taunts Shoto's attempt as he commands Mr. Compress to confirm Katsuki's body. Katsuki reverts to his normal body with Dabi's hand around his neck. Dabi calls checkmate, and the villains disappear within the warp gate. Hideout Raid Arc. Having completed their mission, Dabi and the Vanguard Action Squad return to the hideout. They restrain Katsuki and bring him before Tomura. Tomura tells Katsuki about the League of Villains' goal to reform Hero Society. Then he asks Dabi to remove his restraints. Dabi argues that Katsuki will fight, but Tomura asks him to do it anyway. Dabi then orders Twice to remove the bonds, and then Katsuki immediately blasts Tomura in the face with an explosion. Katsuki tells the League that he'll never join them because he wants to be a hero like All Might. Tomura asks All For One to lend him his power and then orders Compress to restrain Katsuki. The League of Villains is interrupted by the unexpected arrival of what sounds to be a pizza delivery. Then All Might suddenly bursts through the opposite wall with Kamui Woods, and the latter restrains all of the villains with his lacquered chain prison technique. Dabi attempts to free himself from the wooden binds by igniting his flames. However, Gran Torino flies in and stops Dabi by knocking him unconscious with a swift kick to the head. Dabi and the other villains are saved when All For One warps them to the destroyed Nomu factory. All For One activates the quirk of the unconscious Kurogiri and orders the League of Villains to capture Katsuki and retreat. All of the villains are forced to flee the battlefield when All For One uses Magne's quirk to force them into the warp gate. Shie Hassaikai Arc. 3 weeks following the battle in Kamino Ward, the League of Villains members separate in order to conceal themselves and recruit like-minded individuals to their cause. Dabi enters an alleyway hoping to find recruits there. The low-life thugs threaten to kill Dabi, and he recognizes that they're nothing but weak thugs. He tells them to get out of his way and then burns them all to death with his quirk. Dabi mocks them by stating they're garbage, and the least they can do is become kindling for his flames. Dabi is present at the meeting in which Tomura informs them that they will form an alliance with Shie Hassaikai. Dabi says nothing, but Twice and Himiko are unhappy with the decision. But Tomura assures them that it's for the good of the League, and the time when they can avenge Magne and Mr. Compress will come. A few days later, the Shie Hassaikai compound is assaulted by heroes, and with the help of Twice and Himiko, they manage to defeat the entire organization and arrest its members. During the aftermath of the Shie Hassaikai raid, Dabi accompanies Tomura, Spinner, and Mr. Compress on their mission to confront the defeated Overhaul. Tomura claims that his plan is as simple as a game of shogi. Dabi argues that shogi isn't that simple. The League of Villains engages a police convoy carrying Overhaul inside one of the trucks while he's restrained and strapped to a medical bed. Dabi tells Spinner to stop driving erratically because it's making him carsick. He maintains his composure and attacks the convoy with a large flamethrower stream, prompting the sand hero Snatch to appear from within one of the trucks. Dabi recognizes Snatch as a powerful pro-hero while Tomura fights him. He also notes that Tomura's infamy has gotten him way too famous. Tomura crashes several of the trucks into each other while Dabi confronts Snatch himself. Snatch attacks Dabi with a Sand Tiger move, and Dabi counters with a large blast of fire. While Snatch is distracted, Mr. Compress uses his quirk to trap him inside a marble with Dabi's flames. Mr. Compress accidentally burns himself and then asks Dabi if Snatch's sand will burn. Dabi believes Snatch can only transform his upper body into sand and will likely die while compressed. Tomura exacts his revenge on Overhaul by destroying his arms. Spinner, on the other hand, warns his allies that police reinforcements will arrive soon. Dabi, Mr. Compress, and Tomura walk back towards the truck as the flames from their destruction burn in the background. Pro-Hero Arc. Prior to the Hero Billboard JP, the League of Villains has seen better days. They're barely scraping with no funds and have resorted to stealing from other criminal groups and living in a rundown building. Rather than partaking in theft, Dabi spends his time trying to recruit new members. He returns to the filthy hideout and berates his allies for sitting around doing nothing. Twice replies that Dabi just burns everyone he meets. Dabi claims he burns them because they're ambitionless trash, and Himiko taunts him for being a poor judge of character. Spinner confronts Tomura over the state of the League and admits he's only here to fill his empty heart with a new purpose. Dabi taunts him by saying he's just a hollow cosplayer of Stain. They're interrupted by an intense rumbling that brings the villains outside. The League of Villains comes face to face with a giant claiming it's searching for All for One's successor. Dabi questions the identity of this titan, and Tomura claims he's the secret weapon Kurogiri got captured trying to retrieve. The giant quickly overpowers the League, while the voice of All for One's doctor plays from the beast's radio which hangs from his neck. The doctor explains that the giant is named Gigantomachia, and he's All for One's ex-bodyguard. Gigantomachia went into hiding before All for One's defeat, and the doctor claims this meeting was all a part of the plan. Dabi replies that the big guy isn't exactly a generous gift, and lights up his flames. He blasts Gigantomachia in blue flames. Shocked, Dabi watches as the giant brushes off the fire as Himiko tells Dabi his attack didn't work. A recording of All for One's voice soothes Gigantomachia and calms him down. The doctor warps the League to his lair using the warping quirk from Kamino. Dabi immediately notices the Nomu housed in the lab. The doctor commends Dabi's sharp eye and introduces himself as Daruma Ujiko. Annoyed, Dabi asks why the League is at the lair, and the doctor replies that they must prove themselves if they desire his support. In response, Tomura explains his past and why he desires to destroy everything. Bored, Dabi stands by with the others who don't appear to quite understand Tomura's distortion. The doctor accepts Tomura, but he will not fully support the League until they defeat Gigantomachia. Dabi refuses to help because he wants to put more time into recruiting a potential ally. Tomura says he's excited to see who he brings, and the doctor tells Dabi he can help test a high-end Nomu for him. Dabi is assigned to test one of Dr. Ujiko's high-end Nomu. At Hidamari Kindergarten on the same day as the Hero Billboard Chart JP release, Dabi tells the high-end Hood that it is the first intelligent Nomu and he expects good results. Hood attacks the number 1 and 2 pro heroes, Endeavor and Hawks. Dabi watches from within the city limits when Endeavor narrowly wins their fight. With the two pro heroes injured from the fight and before they can request for help, he confronts the two heroes and traps them within a wall of fire. Endeavor recognizes Dabi as the villain who murdered Snatch, and Dabi claims he has no idea who he's talking about. Dabi tells Endeavor he wants to talk while they have the opportunity. Hawks stands up to Dabi and the latter claims he wouldn't try and defeat the two top heroes alone. Then Dabi says that they're both on death's doorstep and decides to attack. That's when Mirko interrupts the latter and attacks Dabi from above. Her fearsome stomps keeps him at bay, making Dabi realize his disadvantage. Dabi then calls Ujiko to use the warping quirk to warp him away. Before he leaves, Dabi calls Endeavor by his real name and tells him not to die. Afterward, Dabi meets with Hawks to discuss Hood's attack. Hawks is upset with Dabi for not keeping to their original plan and holds a blade to his neck. Unfazed, Dabi replies that Hawks wasn't supposed to bring someone as powerful as Endeavor. He questions the lack of casualties from the battle, insisting that a villain sympathizer wouldn't have acted in such a heroic way. Hawks explains he has to keep a heroic appearance to the public to make himself more useful to the League of Villains. Understanding the situation, Dabi walks away and tells Hawks he can't meet their leader yet, but he'll contact him again in the future. While walking towards the harbor, Dabi recalls Snatch and is seemingly moved by the hero's last words to him. Dabi says thinking about all the families he's affected has nearly driven him crazy. He wipes some blood from the patch underneath his eye, as if he was crying. Meta Liberation Army Arc. Almost a month and a half later, Dabi contacts Hawks by phone call and gives the number 2 hero one last job to prove himself to the League. A few days after this, while Dabi hides out on the border between Iwe and Shiga, Ridestro, leader and great commander of the Meta Liberation Army, contacts Tomura. Ridestro informs him that they captured and tortured his broker Giron in order to find them, as the MLA considers Tomura and his allies a threat to their plans. For this reason, he declares war on the League, and informs them that if they don't go to Deka City to confront them, they will use their influence so that they have to face a force of heroes. Tomura accepts the challenge and orders the Doctor to warp everyone to Deka City, where the confrontation must take place. Dabi is also warped to Deka City and regroups with the others for a war against the Meta Liberation Army. Dabi's annoyed they dragged him into their mission to rescue Giron, and this angers Twice. Himiko notices someone approaching the group and Dabi readies his flames. It turns out to be an escort, the pro hero Slide and Go. Slide and Go leads the villains through the seemingly abandoned city where they eventually meet with Koku Hanabata and Chitose Kizuki, two top executives of the army. Koku begins the Liberation Army's revival celebration, and dozens of citizens suddenly ambush the villains. Dabi appears to avoid direct combat while dodging various quirks aimed toward the League. Dabi realizes it's about time he got serious about fighting when suddenly a hooded man tries to crush him using 2 giant ice gauntlets. Dabi avoids it and admits that he's gotten stronger, and now he can tell at a glance this new bruiser is tough too. Getten asks Dabi why he hasn't used his wide range of flames to attack yet, suggesting something might be wrong with his abilities. Dabi smirks and counterattacks with a wave of flames that melts his opponent's ice. The Ice Warrior collects ice from all the nearby buildings and collects it into one massive frozen figure. He claims to have been perfecting his quirk without school his entire life. Dabi taunts him for living such a sad life, and the elements of their quirks collide, splitting the battlefield. The blue flames prove more ferocious and hold the advantage against Getten's ice. Dabi taunts his opponent, calling him outmatched since his ice is all gone. Compress struggles nearby against some of the other warriors and asks for help. Dabi asks why he should help when an army of Twice clones is headed their way. The doubles fight to protect Dabi and Compress from the other warriors. Many of them decide they should try and double Dabi, but Compress urges them to save some fodder for when Gigantomachia awakens. Getten takes out much of Twice's Sad Man's parade with a barrage of ice. Confused, Dabi asks if this town specially manufactures ice. The Iceman explains that he can lower the temperature of the town's water supply in order to generate more ice. Dabi calls him obnoxious for not leading with that in the fight, and Getten responds by claiming the Liberation Army will create a world where status is attained by the strength of one's meta ability. Dabi believes that Getten's words of sheer strength sounds miserable, and rudely asks him to keel over and die. The Ice Warrior claims that Dabi will be the one who dies, as he can smell his burning body from here. Getten has been observing Dabi's quirk, and believes his body is not compatible with it. Dabi's blue flames start to eat away at his body, meaning it's difficult for him to fight prolonged battles. Mr. Compress wishes they could stick Gigantomachia on the Iceman and worries about Dabi's fate. Dr. Ujiko notices the League is in peril and awakens the giant early. The giant proves far more powerful than the army can contend with, and Mr. Compress realizes they were foolish for underestimating him. Mr. Compress asks Dabi to finish up this battle so they can save Tomura before the giant reaches him. Worried for his own leader, Getten flees the area and tries to stop the giant on his own, only to be easily cast aside. Annoyed and smoking from his wounds, Dabi claims he was close to burning that icy freak up before he fled. Tomura achieves victory against the Meta Liberation Army's leader and obliterates half of the city with his quirk. Redestro concedes and hands the Liberation Army over to him. The League of Villains all survive the revival party and recover for a week in a new mansion. Dabi meets back with Hawks and confirms he killed the man as asked. He isn't sure it's actually Best Jeanist, but invites him to the next meeting anyway. While dining on sushi, Compress claims that this is the calm after the storm. Dabi replies that Compress didn't do a single thing in the battle. Spinner asks Dabi for his sushi, and Dabi lets him have it because he hates fish. Dabi and all of his allies are led underground by Skeptic and Trumpet of the Liberation Army. With Tomura as its new leader, the League of Villains and the Meta Liberation Army merge to become the Paranormal Liberation Front. Dabi is one of the 9 lieutenants appointed to Tomura, and will receive a team tailored to him. Dabi then meets up with Hawks sometime after the ceremony, and greets the number 2 pro hero, wondering about the latter's sudden change of mood. Hawks decides to not tell Dabi about his actual mood towards the new formation of the Paranormal Liberation Front. My Hero Academia Heroes Rising. At some point after the clash, Tomura and his allies gain information about one of Ujiko's projects involving quirk and body enhancement upon getting requested to transfer important cargo to an unknown location. The League questions Ujiko what's inside the cargo, to which the doctor simply tells them it has nothing to do with them. With that being said, Dabi, Spinner, and Mr. Compress are assigned to do the task. Although they dislike being treated like regular delivery men, the 3 agree to do Ujiko's request. On one late winter night, the League uses an armored truck to transfer the cargo while fleeing from a group of pursuing pro heroes on night duty. It turns out that the information about Ujiko's project was leaked out, and the heroes have apparently formed a trap to prevent the League from escaping. When Rocklock and his partner try to get closer, Dabi emerges from one of the truck's windows and unleashes a blast of fire straight at them. This forces Rocklock to use Deadbolt to protect him and his partner, preventing them to continue their pursuit. The other 2 also fend off the heroes, but one of them manages to board the truck. Dabi acts quickly and brutally cremates the hero to death before he could do anything. Although they successfully blocked off their pursuers, Spinner wonders who alerted the heroes of their escape route, to which Dabi replies it must have been an info leak. Endeavor and his small team revealed themselves at the end of the road, surprising both Spinner and Mr. Compress. Dabi, on the other hand, expresses delight at Endeavor's arrival and launches another large fire blast at him. Endeavor counters this by using Flash Fire Fist, causing both attacks to cancel each other out. Spinner decides to accelerate the truck while Dabi readies himself to release a more powerful blast of his flames, both intending to kill Endeavor right on spot. Unfazed by this sudden move, Endeavor tells his allies to leave the scene as he retaliates with Prominence Burn, which ultimately breaks through Dabi's attack and consumes the truck in a burst of flames. The villains melt into sludge as they turn out to be clones created by Twice. The burning truck rolls off the road and crashes at a nearby forest, which was later revealed to be exactly where Ujiko wanted them to drop off the cargo. A few days later, the League relocates to an abandoned shack. They discuss who was inside the convoy, to which Dabi believes that it wasn't that important, just as Ujiko mentioned before. Despite their discussion, all members, excluding Tomura, are still unaware of what truly was inside the convoy. Endeavor Agency Arc. As the Paranormal Liberation Front prepare themselves for the next coming months, Dabi sends Star Servant to cause havoc at a nearby city. Later, Dabi and his allies, excluding Tomura and Getten, are present at a meeting in which Hawks informs them of Endeavor's decision to take on 2 new interns other than Shoto. Dabi comments that he feels like the students haven't changed ever since the training camp incident. The lieutenants are also informed of Tomura's ultimate scheme to destroy everything in about 4 months once the latter finishes his upgrades. Afterwards, Dabi would soon send Ending to attack Endeavor and his new trainees. Paranormal Liberation War Arc. Once 4 months have passed, Dabi is assigned as a commander for the Vanguard Action Guerrilla Warfare Regiment, Violet, along with Getten. When the heroes launch their attack on the Paranormal Liberation Front, Dabi and the other lieutenants are first unaware of the raid. That is, until noticing the Gunga Mountain Villa mansion splitting apart by Cementos' quirk. The Paranormal Liberation Front lieutenants decide to evacuate their subordinates, and instead send their lower-ranked advisors to fight the oncoming storm. While everyone else evacuates, Dabi moves towards somewhere else in mind. Upon hearing Twice screaming, Dabi heads straight to the scene, knowing that Hawks has betrayed the organization. Dabi eventually reaches where Twice and Hawks are fighting. He takes time to hear what Hawks has to say about his role. Dabi then makes his move by firing off a large flamethrower to save Twice from harm. Dabi enters the room and approaches an injured Hawks, who is badly scorched by his flames. The villain steps on Hawks' face while emitting flames from his souls, mocking the hero for making excuses for his hero-like behavior. However, Hawks reveals that he survived Dabi's assault thanks to his wings carrying him and Twice to safety. Dabi tells Hawks that he lost most of his feathers for combat. Hawks calls out Dabi for nearly burning his friend to death, but Dabi admits that it's expected of heroes to put their lives on the line. Dabi smugly reveals that he never considered trusting Hawks from the start of his cooperation with the League. With that said, Dabi launches another barrage of flames straight at the winged hero, causing a large explosion outside the crumbling mansion. Twice manages to escape Hawks' grasp and tells Dabi to continue assaulting Hawks. Dabi then encourages Twice to go wild and fight at full power, high-fiving his comrade while holding back Hawks with his flames. Unfortunately, Hawks flew outside of Dabi's range, shocking the flame villain once more. Dabi proceeds to call Hawks by his real name to catch the hero off guard while unleashing another flamethrower. This gives Twice barely enough time to escape, only for Hawks to land a fatal blow on the villain, killing him in the process. Upon realizing that Twice has died, Dabi completely goes berserk on Hawks, sarcastically mocking the hero for killing his comrade. Dabi continues to beat down Hawks with every bit of rage and anger stored inside him. Hawks wonders why Dabi's smiling despite witnessing Twice's death. Dabi reveals that he can't cry due to burning his tear glands in the past, and he's upset by Twice's death since he was necessary for his own dreams to come true. Hawks then questions Dabi's true identity, to which the villain responds with a sinister tone. Dabi opens up that he never cared about Shigaraki nor the League. All he ever cared about was carrying out Stain's ideology and spreading it to the world. Just as the villain readies himself to burn Hawks to death, Dabi gets pushed back by the timely arrival of Tsukiyomi. Dabi tells Fumikage it's pathetic that UA forced their students on the battlefield and cruelly points out that Hawks murdered Twice when the latter was trying to protect his friends. This shocks Fumikage hard to the heart. Dabi then questions Fumikage why he's here and mocks him for looking up to a hero that's far dirtier than the villains. However, Fumikage refuses to falter at Dabi's words, which makes the latter realize the situation. Dabi readies his flames just as Fumikage prepares Dark Shadow to try to get him and Hawks to safety. The villain shoots out a large flamethrower to burn the two heroes, nearly scorching Fumikage to death in the process. A barely conscious Hawks tells Fumikage that Dabi will keep talking, as his taunting serves as a way for him to recharge his flames, telling his intern to leave. Fumikage sends Dark Shadow to attack Dabi, but the attack misses. Dabi then jumps down and uses his flames on his feet to hover downward to chase after Fumikage and Hawks. However, their skirmish is interrupted by Geten's sudden ice attack, allowing Fumikage and Hawks to escape. After Gigantomachia begins to make his move under Tomura's orders, Dabi is among the other PLF lieutenants riding on the behemoth's back. As Gigantomachia tries breaking through Mount Lady, who tries to hold him back, the villains discuss what happened when he suddenly grabbed all of them. Dabi deduces that Tomura has awoken. Otherwise, Gigantomachia wouldn't even be moving. Gigantomachia decides to take a shortcut to reach Tomura quicker, so he throws aside Mount Lady by her foot and charges forward to his destination. With the pursuing pros out of the way, Gigantomachia and the League continue to escape. As Gigantomachia finally arrives to Tomura's location and protects him from the combined attacks of Nejire and Shoto, Dabi appears from the back of the giant villain to announce his arrival to the heroes on the ground, pleasantly realizing that both Endeavor and Shoto are there. Endeavor angrily calls out Dabi's name, but the villain retorts by telling Endeavor to call him out by another name, Toya. Endeavor and Shoto are frozen in shock as Dabi removes his hair dye to reveal his white hair and his identity as Endeavor's oldest son. Dabi continues by saying that he's been watching Endeavor all this time and has started broadcasting his past to the entire world, all to discredit his father while telling Endeavor of the terrible pain he endured as a child, asking himself why he even existed. His original plan was to kill Shoto when he became a hero, but after Endeavor took the #1 spot, Dabi decided to send multiple threats, such as Hood, Star Servant, and ending his father's way. He then asks Endeavor if he feels good now that he's the #1 hero, and he can now look at his children with pride. He yells that it's wrong for Endeavor to assume he can just keep moving forward, and that the past never dies, while taunting his father and telling them to dance together in this hell. Endeavor refuses to believe this, stating that Dabi is telling a despicable lie, but the villain replies that it's the despicable truth. At the same time, Dabi reveals his blood tests on his broadcast to confirm his identity as the son of Endeavor, while continuing to deride his father as a man who completely lacks empathy. The broadcast then shows doctored footage of Hawks killing twice to make it seem as though the number 2 hero ruthlessly killed a man who was trying to save his friends and paint him as a murderer, while also revealing that Hawks killed Best Jeanist, the number 3 hero. Dabi also reveals more of Hawks' past, how the father of Hawks was a serial robber and a murderer who was ironically arrested by Endeavor. The villain derides heroes as individuals who only care about themselves and use others to promote themselves. Dabi thanks Endeavor for going strong until now, then jumps down, preparing to eliminate his father and the others with his prominence burn. But before he can do this, he's immobilized by wires. He looks up. Dabi's surprised by the hero's arrival, having believed him to be dead. Best Jeanist tells him that he's overreached with his ambitions and now he will come apart like inferior denim. Dabi, however, says that even if Best Jeanist is alive, that won't sweep under the rug the Todoroki family's hard truth. Nejire Hado, meanwhile, tries to strike Tomura, but unfortunately gets blasted by Dabi's flames as he's burning through the wires, much to Shoto and the others' horror. As she falls out of the sky, Dabi tells Endeavor that once again, another child with a bright future has been burnt up by his flames as he breaks free of his restraints. Shoto desperately begs Dabi to stop. As Shoto clashes with his brother, he reveals to Dabi that one of the villains he sent Endeavor's way nearly killed Natsuo, the one who he claimed he cried to every day. Dabi, however, merely says it was a shame he didn't die because then Endeavor would have suffered more. An incredulous Shoto asks his brother if he's insane, and Dabi confirms he doesn't feel anything anymore. In one final clash, as Shoto attempts to use Flash Fire Fist, Jet Burn on Dabi, the latter responds with a larger, more powerful version of the same attack that overwhelms and knocks out his younger brother. He sarcastically apologizes to him and leaves the battlefield since killing Shoto now would be pointless to Dabi if Endeavor is about to pass out and not completely break yet. He then meets up with Mr. Compress, who uses his quirk on him and puts him in Spinner's scarf so he can escape with the rest of the League. The heroes attempt to stop the remaining League members, Sans, Gigantomachia, Himiko, and Compress, from escaping with the surviving Near High-Ends, but all is in vain as they proceed to escape the battlefield. After the League successfully escapes to one of their lairs, Dabi is later seen sitting beside All For One, possessing Shigaraki, who is rejoicing from the series of jailbreaks he caused all over Japan. He then asks Dabi and Spinner to keep watch while he lets Shigaraki's body rest. 2 days later, Dabi is lying on a sofa in the former Creature Rejection Clan mansion, contemplating his own burn scars and commenting on how they've gotten worse, even though he doesn't feel any different. Knowing that Endeavor is probably still alive and recuperating, he deduces that not only does his position not allow him to die even if he wanted to, but he would also have to make a public statement soon, something he joyfully awaits as he expects a pathetic display. He then tells his former family to take a good look at him in the depths of hell while shedding a tear of blood. He then reminisces about the tragic night he lost control of his flames, commenting that this was to be expected since his father only ever taught him how to turn up the heat. Did you enjoy our video? Be sure to check out these other great videos from the Amagi, and make sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos. Thanks for watching, I'm out.